Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The Pakistani army violates the ceasefire along the line of control in the Poonch and Kupwara sectors. Meanwhile, China backs Pakistan's call for an impartial probe on the Pahalgam terror attack. Canadian prosecutors charge a 30-year-old Vancouver man with murdering 11 people aged 5 to 65. This comes after a suspect plows an SUV through a Filipino festival crowd just one day before the federal Canadian election. North Korea confirms it's sending troops to Ukraine to fight for Russia for the first time. Pyongyang claims its soldiers helped Russian forces completely liberate the Kursk region on Kim Jong-un's orders. Canada goes to the polls today, facing economic woes and Donald Trump at the forefront of voters' minds. Liberals and Conservatives clash over annexation threats and economic challenges. Iran's supreme leader orders a full investigation into a massive blast that killed 40 and injured over 1,000 people. The explosion rocked a major port south of the country on Saturday. Gaza's defense agency says Israeli strikes killed 51 people in the past 24 hours. This comes as Israel intensifies a bombardment after conflict resumes following a broken ceasefire in March. US airstrikes on Yemen's capital kill at least 8 people overnight, according to Houthi sources. The American military releases statements confirming launching 800 strikes during its month-long campaign. Israel launches an airstrike on Beirut's southern suburbs after evacuating a building tied to Hezbollah. The attack comes despite a ceasefire agreement that ended intense fighting 5 months ago. Welcome to NewsX World. Our top story today: tensions between India and Pakistan continue to escalate. Pakistan violated the ceasefire across the line of control for the 4th consecutive night, targeting Indian positions in Kupwara and Poonch. Indian forces responded swiftly to the unprovoked small arms fire. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the Pahalgam attack continues to unfold. As part of a diplomatic response, India revoked visas for Pakistani nationals, leading to the exit of 509 Pakistanis through the Attari border. In return, 744 Indian nationals returned from Pakistan. The United States has called for a responsible solution to the rising tensions, while China has backed Pakistan, advocating for an impartial investigation into the terrorist attack. Pakistan has also sought international involvement, calling for an inquiry into India's accusations regarding the attack. The National Investigation Agency has taken over the probe into the Pahalgam attack, which killed 26 people, including 25 Indians. Forensic teams are working on gathering evidence, while authorities continue to piece together the details of the tragedy. We are joined by Brian Thomas, reporting live from Jammu and Kashmir. Brian, what updates have you got for us today? A 4th consecutive day of violations from Pakistan along the line of control.
Yes, well, clearly, this is the 4th, like clearly you mentioned, yes, clearly, this is the 4th consecutive time where Pakistan has violated the ceasefire, and it happened where there was a small, small firing that happened on Kupwara, and also the Pooch area that is in the LOC, that is near Jammu and Kashmir, Jammu rather. And yes, clearly the situation. If we talk about the city itself, yes, there's a situation that has been better in terms of the tourists. They are started to flock towards Kashmir as well. Yesterday also we've covered that there were many such tourists also who were coming back to Pahalgam also after the after the terror attack that has happened, and they are showing the courage and resilience also, and the unity also of the tourists. But again, talking about, yes, the visa, the diplomatic turnouts also that has happened, where more than 700 Pakistani nationals were sent, back to their nation, that is Pakistan itself. Even today at the Atari border, also there were many such Pakistani nationals also who were waiting to go back to their nations. Yes, the medical exemption has been extended till tomorrow itself. But again, the situation, if we talk about the diplomatic, the tensions are still continuing itself. But yes, India is, the security forces are working around the clock 24/7 to keep a vigil, to keep peace among the region as well. And they have, in an attempt to, demolish and identify, track, and eliminate the terrorists itself. They has demolished more than 7 residential properties of the terrorists. You talk about Lashkar-e-Taiba, you talk about the TRF, you talk about Jaish-e-Mohammed. They've eliminated the houses demolished the houses with district administration itself. And today also there is a parliament, there is a assembly session also that is likely to start from 10:30 itself. That will be very essential, and because that will focus on the recent Pahalgam terror attack that had happened, that had jolted not only Kashmir but the entire nation itself. Yes.
Brian Thomas, thank you very much for joining us, and we will continue to bring you more updates from that region. Moving on now, in a shocking incident, a deadly car ramming in Vancouver, Canada, has left 11 people dead and dozens more injured. The attack occurred during a Filipino street festival in the Sunset on Fraser neighborhood. The suspect, 30-year-old Kai Jean Adam Low, has been charged with 8 counts of second-degree murder. Police say Low has a history of mental health issues and had previous interactions with authorities. No terrorist motive has been confirmed. Let's listen to what the interim Chief Constable Steve Rye had to say.
The vehicle that struck festival goers approached the festival area from the west on East 43rd Avenue. It entered a small crowd enclosed area and drove through the crowd. There were hundreds of festival goers still on the street, and multiple people were struck by the vehicle. There are now 11 confirmed fatalities. We believe dozens more are injured, some seriously, and the number of dead could rise in the coming days or weeks. While I'm not prepared to speak about the potential motive, I can now say with confidence that the evidence in this case does not lead us to believe this was an act of terrorism. I can also tell you that the person we have in custody does have a significant history of interactions with police and healthcare professionals related to mental health. I am unable to publicly identify the person who is in custody because charges have not yet been laid. Last night, as members of Vancouver's Filipino community gathered for a celebration of community and culture in East Vancouver, their collective safety and security were stolen when a man in a vehicle drove through a festival crowd and struck dozens of people. 11 people have now died. Their ages range from 5 to 65. Dozens more are injured, some critically, and some have not yet been identified.
The attack unfolded on the eve of Canada's federal election, with leaders momentarily shifting focus from the campaign. Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed deep sorrow, stating that families had lost loved ones in a nightmare event. Carney later visited Vancouver, attending a vigil in honour of the victims. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre condemned the attack, calling it a senseless act of violence. Local authorities are working alongside federal authorities as the investigation continues. Let's take a listen in to what the candidates had to say.
Last night, families lost a sister, a brother, a mother, a father, a son, or a daughter. Those families are living every family's nightmare. And to them and to the many others who were injured, to the Filipino-Canadian community, and to everyone in the broader Lower Mainland, Vancouver, I would like to offer my deepest condolences and my wishes for strength and compassion in this tragic time. I know that I join all Canadians in mourning with you. I know that Canadians are united.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to be here today with you in solidarity after the terrible attacks that we witnessed in British Columbia. I know many of you are shocked, heartbroken, and saddened by this senseless act of violence and by the innocent, treasured lives that have been lost. And Anna and I just wanted you all to know that our hearts are with you today. All Canadians are united in solidarity with the Filipino community. All Canadians are united with you in mourning the loss of these treasured lives and in binding our country together to support the surviving.
And we are now joined by Quinton A Hitchcock, political consultant located in Washington, D.C., to discuss this topic further. Quinton, thank you very much for joining us. This is obviously a real tragedy that's happened in British Columbia yesterday, but given the timing of this tragedy just before the federal election, obviously, how do you think this attack has impacted the national mood and the political conversation in Canada?
Well, Thomas, first of all, such a tragic event to take place on such an amazing city and an amazing group of people. We know right now there's about 41% of Vancouver is made up of Asian population. So all of these people, and rightfully so, are in mourning right now. So this has definitely rocked the city. This is a city that definitely does not get attacks like this all too often. I think if there is any silver lining here, it's that both political parties in Canada and all candidates related to that are going to, suspend campaign activities. All candidates and, political rhetoric is going to be paused as is appropriate. So that's the silver lining here. But these car ramming attacks are becoming all too common in our world. And in just the last decade, I did some research and I was really troubled to find that in just the last decade, there have been 62 of these car ramming attacks worldwide, killing over 240 people and injuring over 1,000. So right now, our hearts are with Canada, but this is something that a lot of world leaders are going to have to get a handle on, as this is taking a disturbing trend.
Yes, and Quinton, you have spoken about these car ramming attacks that have become increasingly common in recent years, but authorities, what they have done is they've ruled out terrorism and instead are citing mental health issues. How important is it for investigators to maintain transparency in these high-profile cases to avoid speculation?
That's so incredibly important, because it's either an act of violence or it's an act of terrorism, which means it's politically motivated or ideologically motivated, all of which are unacceptable. But nevertheless, these are things that governments are going to have to start being much more proactive about. I hate to say this, but the reality, Thomas, is that there are becoming a lot more similarities between car ramming attacks and the gun problem that we have in America, where we are seeing in the past decade a rise in mass shootings. So whether it's an act of terrorism or just an act of violence, this is going to pose a significant threat to the public in so many populated areas. Just New Year's Day, we're talking, just less than 5 months ago, this hit home to us. And we had an incident take place on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, which is a very, very crowded area, where some 14 people got killed and another 60 people were injured. So this is a tragic moment for Vancouver. Our hearts are with them, but this is something that we're going to have to get a hold of if we're going to start protecting the public moving forward.
Yes, Quinton A Hitchcock, thank you very much for your insight, as always. We now stay in the region. The final day of Canada's election campaign on Sunday. The final day of Canada's election campaign, April the 27th, was marked by tragedy, as at least 11 people were killed when a man with a history of mental health issues drove an SUV through a crowd at a Filipino community festival in Vancouver. Both political leaders, Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, paused their campaigns to offer condolences. New Democratic Party leader Jagmeet Singh visited the parish meeting with local residents and offering comfort. Carney wrapped up his 5-week campaign with a focus on international issues, particularly the strained relationship with the United States. He criticised US President Donald Trump for betraying Canada, stating that the rupture in the global economy caused by Trump's actions would forever change Canada's relationship with its southern neighbour. Carney described the current situation as a tragedy, but also a new reality that Canada must confront. Here's what Mark Carney said.
It is true that President Trump has betrayed Canada. He's betrayed Canada, and he has ruptured the global economy. Our old relationship with the United States is over, unfortunately. And America's leadership of the global economy is over. And this is a tragedy. This is still in play, but it is a tragedy. It is also our new reality. We have to recognize.
Meanwhile, Poilievre, also campaigning on the final day, echoed Carney's sentiments about the US tariffs, emphasizing the need for Canada to take a firm stance against American economic pressure. Both leaders expressed their sorrow over the tragic events in Vancouver, though it remains uncertain if the tragedy will affect voters' decisions on Election Day. Let's take a listen to what Poilievre had to say.
Forward production here in Canada. I've announced that as long as the tariffs are in place, Conservatives will axe the federal sales tax on Canadian-made automobiles. We will unlock construction of 4 massive Arctic icebreakers that will reassert our dominance in our waters and keep the Russians and the Chinese out of our territory.
A poll from Nanos showed a widening gap between the two parties, with the Liberals at 43% support compared to 38.9% support for the Conservatives. As Canadians prepare to head to the polls, both leaders are trying to sway undecided voters in a campaign focused on the future of Canada's relationship with the United States and the challenges posed by the American economic policies. Let's move over to Europe now, where talks aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine have entered what the United States is calling a critical week. US President Donald Trump, who has launched a major diplomatic push since taking office in January, is pressuring both sides to reach a deal. Trump urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to stop shooting and to sign a deal to end the fighting, warning that without quick progress, the US could walk away from its role as a broker. Let's take a listen to Trump's comment.
Well, I want him to stop shooting, sit down and sign a deal. And we have the confines of a deal, I believe. And I want him to sign it and be done with it and just go back to life.
Speaking after his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Pope Francis's funeral in Rome, Trump said he believes Zelensky is ready to give up Crimea as he spoke as a part of a peace settlement, despite Zelensky's repeated public denials. Let's take a listen in to Trump's comment.
Is Zelensky ready to give up Crimea, do you think, Mr. President? Oh, I think so, yeah. Look, Crimea was 12 years ago.
Trump described his meeting with Zelensky as going well, but expressed disappointment that Russia continued attacks on Ukraine shortly after their Vatican talks. This comes as over the weekend, Russian missile and drone strikes killed 4 people and wounded more than a dozen across eastern Ukraine. This is what Trump said about his meeting with Zelensky.
Vladimir Zelensky, and how did that meeting go? I think the meeting went well. We'll see what happens over the next few days. We'll probably learn a lot. I was very disappointed that missiles were flying by Russia, but that missiles were flying. Very disappointing. We'll see how it...
Meanwhile, President Zelensky pushed back against Moscow's claims about the battlefield. He said Ukraine's forces had not been kicked out of Russia's Kursk region, despite Moscow claiming the liberation of its western region. We are joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Nalapat. Obviously, we've seen over the past couple of days a possible souring on the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, by US President Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts of the current state of diplomatic relations and the state of this peace deal?
Well, about a peace deal, I'm not at all sure, for a simple reason that Ukrainians are living in a fantasy world, at least where President Zelensky is concerned, and Trump is living in a fantasy world. The Russians are not going to stop their kinetic attack until they capture as much territory as they feel is important for their secretary. And the point is that as far as the US is concerned, well, I think Trump is losing leverage with the Russians. If he comes down heavily on them, he's going to lose leverage to the Russians. The fact is that Zelensky is talking about giving up Crimea, but they're not going to do that. If Zelensky is around, they will restart the war sometime and retake Crimea. And as a consequence, Moscow is aware of that. So they're very clear. They want as much territory as possible so that even if a war is restarted, it will be within safe boundaries. So I'm sorry, I think we are far away from a peace deal.
Professor Nalapat, are you saying when you say that both Ukraine and Donald Trump are living in a fantasy world, are you saying that Russia can't be bargained with?
Look, I'm saying that the Russians realize that the bulk of the Ukrainian state is now anti-Russia. I'm saying that it is a mistake, frankly, to push the boundaries of NATO and to get involved in the Ukraine war. But the reality is it has taken place. Now, the fact is that even if Zelensky says he wants peace, what he wants is a temporary ceasefire where he can regroup, mobilize, and launch a fresh attack. That's what happened the first time around. And I can tell you very clearly, the Russians are aware of that, and they're going to push on. Whether the United States likes it or not, they're going to push on. Donald Trump would like a quick diplomatic victory. He believes in quick victories and quick successes, which is probably why his popularity has reached the lowest level of any US president unless you go back to Dwight D. Eisenhower. But the reality is we're very far from a peace deal. The Russians are not going to stop because they know the Ukrainians are not sincere about a lasting. They're only wanting a ceasefire to regroup and attack again.
Professor Nalapat, I want to get your immediate reaction to North Korea's admission that it has sent troops to Ukraine, its first admission after reports. How should the international community react to this development?
Well, North Korea is probably even more sanctioned than Russia. So I really don't see how the international community can react. The reality is North Koreans are spending whatever money they can steal from crypto or whatever on their nuclear and missile program because the Kim family is aware that's the only protection. After seeing what happened to Gaddafi, after seeing what happened to Saddam Hussein, they're not going to give up their WMD. So the reality is North Korea is in, and North Korea and China are very closely linked. But for a wink and a nod from China, the North Korean troops would not be fighting on behalf of the Russian side. So I think that's something for those who keep talking about China wanting peace. The reality is the Chinese are interested in keeping the pot boiling in Ukraine because they're focusing on Taiwan and they want as much attention to be diverted to Europe as possible. And the Ukraine war is serving that extremely well.
Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for your insights, as always. We now move to some breaking news. One person has died and multiple others are injured after a boat collided with a ferry near the Memorial Causeway Bridge in Florida. The crash occurred just after 10 p.m. local time, and the boat fled the scene. More than 40 people were aboard the ferry when the incident took place. Authorities have declared a mass casualty event, with one fatality confirmed hours later. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is leading the investigation. We will bring you more updates on that developing story. But now we move over to the Middle East, where at least 51 people were killed in a deadly airstrike in Gaza, according to the territory's civil defense agency. The strikes carried out by Israeli forces targeted multiple areas, including a group of civilians in eastern Gaza City, a home in Khan Yunis, and a cafe near the Berij refugee camp. Meanwhile, Israel resumed its military campaign on March the 18th, following the collapse of a 2-month ceasefire with Hamas. The Gaza Health Ministry, run by Hamas, now reports the overall death toll since the war began has risen to more than 52,200 people, with hundreds of previously missing people now confirmed as being dead. The war began with the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023, which killed over 1,200 people and led to the abduction of 251 hostages. Israel says its renewed offensive is aimed at securing the release of the 58 remaining captives, 34 of whom are believed to be dead. We stay in the region now, where at least 8 people were killed in US strikes on Yemen's capital, Sanaa, including women and children, according to the rebel Houthi media. The strikes targeted the Qahban area in northern Sanaa, with additional attacks reported in the Houthis' northern stronghold of Sada and Al-Miran provinces. Houthis also claimed another missile launch towards Israel on Sunday. Israel's military says it intercepted the missile before it reached its territory. These latest bombings raised the death toll from US strikes in Yemen to 228 since mid-March, based on Houthi reports. The US military says it has hit over 800 targets under Operation Rough Rider, killing hundreds of Houthi fighters and leaders in an effort to curb missile and drone attacks on international shipping and Israel. Meanwhile, the Houthis aligned with Iran, saying their attacks are in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Their actions have disrupted traffic through the Suez Canal, a vital global trade route, forcing ships into longer, costlier routes around Africa. Once again, staying in the Middle East, where Israel has launched an airstrike on southern Beirut, Lebanon. It's the third since a ceasefire was declared on November the 27th last year. The strike targeted a building in the Hadath neighborhood that Israel claims was used by Hezbollah to store precision-guided missiles. A plume of smoke was seen rising over the area, and Lebanese TV aired the footage of flames near the site. Meanwhile, Israel warned civilians to evacuate ahead of the strike, saying it would not allow Hezbollah to use Beirut suburbs as a safe haven. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office defended the action, calling it a necessary move to counter threats from the Iran-backed group. Meanwhile, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun condemned the strike as a violation of the ceasefire and called on the US and France to pressure Israel to stop its attacks. The United Nations also urged restraint, warning that further escalation could derail the truce. Meanwhile, a separate Israeli drone strike in southern Lebanon killed one person, reportedly a Hezbollah member. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.